The house had been in Daniel's family for 3 generations, but he'd never actually lived in it until the reading of his grandmother's will. To my grandson Daniel Christopher Reeves, the lawyer had read in that dry, professional tone they all seemed to perfect, I leave my home at 432 Maple Street, along with all its contents and the small trust fund for its maintenance. May you find the same peace within its walls that I did. Daniel had sat in the lawyer's office, stunned. He'd expected maybe some photographs, perhaps a piece of jewelry, not an entire house. Not the sprawling Victorian that had loomed over his childhood visits like something out of a Gothic novel, all turrets and gingerbread trim and windows that seemed to watch you. There is one condition, the lawyer had continued. The house must remain in the family for at least 5 years before it can be sold. Your grandmother was quite insistent on this point. 5 years? Daniel had just turned 28. His apartment lease in the city was up in 2 months. He was working remotely as a software developer, drowning in student loans and barely making rent. The universe was handing him a solution on a silver platter. There was just one problem. What about me? The voice came from the corner of the office, and Daniel had turned to see his best friend since childhood, Adrian Cole, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. Mrs. Reeves promised me I could live there too, she told me last Christmas. The lawyer had shuffled through his papers. Ah yes, there is a note here. Adrian is welcome to live in the house as long as he wishes. He's as much family as anyone. It seems your grandmother was quite fond of Mr. Cole. Daniel and Adrian had looked at each other across the office. They'd been best friends since they were 7 years old, inseparable through elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. They'd weathered everything together: Daniel's parents' divorce, Adrian's father's death, heartbreaks and triumphs, and all the messy in between. But they hadn't lived together since their freshman year dorm room, and that had been complicated. So we'd both be living there? Daniel had asked carefully. If Mr. Cole wishes, yes, the house is certainly large enough. Adrian had pushed off from the wall, extending his hand. Roommates again, like old times. Daniel had hesitated for just a moment that stretched too long, that said too much, before taking Adrian's hand. Like old times. That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, Daniel stood in front of 432 Maple Street on a gray October afternoon, moving boxes stacked beside him, and wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The house was beautiful in a faded, forgotten way. 3 stories of deep blue paint that was peeling at the corners, white trim that needed touching up, a wraparound porch with a swing that creaked in the autumn wind. The front garden was overgrown, rose bushes gone wild, the brick pathway cracked and sprouting weeds. It looked haunted. It looked like it held secrets. It looked like the kind of place where you couldn't hide from yourself anymore. It's bigger than I remembered, Adrian said, coming to stand beside him. He was carrying 2 boxes stacked so high Daniel could barely see his face, just a glimpse of messy dark hair and the gray eyes that had been haunting Daniel's dreams since he was 19 years old. Gran kept it up better when she was younger, Daniel said. The last few years after Gramps died, she couldn't manage it alone. Well, now she has us. Adrian set down the boxes with a grunt. 2 reasonably capable men in their late 20s. How hard can it be? Daniel looked at the peeling paint, the overgrown garden, the shutters hanging at odd angles. I think we're about to find out. The inside of the house was both better and worse than Daniel had feared. Better because most of the structure was sound. His grandmother had at least kept up with the important maintenance. The roof didn't leak, the foundation was solid, the plumbing worked, the bones were good. Worse because it was clear no one had really lived here in years. Dust covered every surface. Furniture was draped in white sheets like ghosts. The air smelled of old wood and older memories of time passing and lives moving on. And it was huge. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a library, a formal dining room, a kitchen that belonged in a different century, a ballroom that took up half the 3rd floor, room after room after room, all empty, all waiting. I call the turret room, Adrian announced, already halfway up the main staircase. His voice echoed in the cavernous space. The turret room is freezing in winter, Daniel called after him, and the window doesn't close all the way. Then I'll fix it, I'm handy, remember. Daniel did remember. Adrian had always been good with his hands: carpentry, plumbing, basic electrical work. He'd learned it all from his father before the cancer took him their sophomore year of college. While Daniel had buried himself in code and algorithms, Adrian had built things, fixed things, made things work. It was one of the 1,000 things Daniel loved about him. Stop, Daniel told himself firmly, we're not doing this again. He'd spent 9 years getting over Adrian Cole. 9 years since that disastrous night their freshman year when he'd gotten drunk and confessed his feelings, and Adrian had looked at him with something like pity and said, "Danny, you're my best friend, you know I'm not. I don't feel that way about guys." 9 years of carefully maintaining their friendship while burying everything else. 9 years of dating other people, of pretending his heart didn't stutter every time Adrian smiled at him, of becoming an expert at loving someone from a safe distance. And now, they were going to live together. In a house with more rooms than they could possibly need, more space than they could fill, but somehow Daniel knew it wouldn't be enough. The distance between them would never be enough. "Danny," Adrian's voice floated down from upstairs, "come look at this view." Daniel climbed the stairs, his footsteps loud on the old wood. He found Adrian in the turret room, standing by the curved windows that overlooked the back garden and the forest beyond. "Look," Adrian said, gesturing out the window, "you can see all the way to the lake from here. God, I forgot how beautiful this place is." He was silhouetted against the afternoon light, and Daniel's breath caught. Adrian had always been beautiful in that careless way. Some people were tall and lean, dark hair always slightly too long, sharp cheekbones, and a mouth that smiled easily. He was wearing an old college sweatshirt and jeans with paint stains, and Daniel wanted to photograph him, to capture this moment, to have proof that beauty like this existed. "Yeah," Daniel managed, "beautiful." Adrian turned, caught him staring, and something flickered across his face, too fast for Daniel to read. Then he smiled, easy and familiar. "I'm glad we're doing this, living here together. It feels right, you know, like we're supposed to be here." "Yeah," Daniel said again, because what else could he say? "I've been in love with you since we were 19, and living together is going to destroy me. It feels right." They spent the first week cleaning. It was exhausting, dusty, sometimes disgusting work. They uncovered furniture and washed windows and swept floors and argued about whether to keep Gran's collection of porcelain cats. Adrian said yes, they were vintage. Daniel said they were creepy and stared at you. They fell into a rhythm quickly, the way they always did. Daniel would work on his laptop in the morning while Adrian fixed things around the house. They'd break for lunch together, making sandwiches in the ancient kitchen and eating on the porch swing. Afternoons were for more cleaning, more organizing, more slowly making the house theirs. Evenings were the hardest. Because evenings were when they'd sit together in the library, the one room they'd managed to make comfortable, with a fire crackling in the fireplace and their grandmother's ancient radio playing jazz. Adrian would sketch in his notebook. He was an illustrator working on a graphic novel that Daniel thought was brilliant, while Daniel read or worked on side projects. It was domestic, intimate, everything Daniel had dreamed of and nothing he could actually have. "Tell me about your book," Daniel said one evening about a week and a half after they'd moved in. They were on their second bottle of wine, both of them loose and warm from the fire and the alcohol. Adrian looked up from his sketches, a smudge of charcoal on his cheek that Daniel desperately wanted to wipe away. "You've heard about it 100 times. Tell me again." Adrian's smile was soft. "It's about two boys who find a door to another world in their grandmother's attic. They have adventures, fight monsters, save kingdoms, but really it's about—" He paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. "It's about finding where you belong, about home not being a place but a person." Daniel's heart ached. "That's beautiful." "It's sappy." "It's honest." Daniel took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "Is it based on us, the two boys?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe, a little. We did have adventures in your grand's attic." "We did." Daniel remembered summers spent exploring the house, finding treasures in forgotten corners, making up elaborate stories about the people who'd lived here before. "I found a box of love letters once, in the attic, between your grandfather and another man." Adrian's eyes widened. "What?" "Before he married Gran, there were dozens of letters all hidden away. I never told her I found them, but I always wondered." Daniel trailed off. "If he was happy," Adrian supplied quietly, "if he chose right." "Yeah." They sat in silence, the fire popping, the old house settling around them with creaks and sighs. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Inside, Daniel felt something shifting, some tectonic plate of his carefully controlled feelings starting to move. "Danny," Adrian said, and his voice was strange, "can I tell you something?" Daniel's heart started pounding. "Always. I've been thinking a lot lately about choices, about what we tell ourselves we want versus what we actually want." Adrian set down his sketchbook, met Daniel's eyes. "About that night freshman year." Daniel went very still. They'd never talked about it, not once in 9 years. It was the unspoken thing between them, the wound they'd both agreed to pretend had healed. "Adrian." "I handled it wrong," Adrian interrupted. "What you told me that night, how you felt, I was scared and stupid and I said things I didn't mean." "You meant them," Daniel said quietly. "It's okay, I got over it." "Did you?" The question hung in the air. Daniel could lie, should lie, keep the friendship intact, maintain the careful distance they'd built. But he was tired, tired of hiding, tired of pretending, tired of loving someone in silence. "No," he admitted, "I never got over you." Adrian inhaled sharply. "Danny." "It's fine," Daniel said quickly, standing up, needing to move, needing to escape this conversation before he said too much. "I know you don't feel the same way. I've known for 9 years. I'm not expecting anything. I can manage it." "What if I don't want you to manage it anymore?" Daniel froze. "What?" Adrian stood too, crossing the space between them. He was close enough that Daniel could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell his cologne mixed with charcoal and wood smoke. "I've been lying to myself for 9 years," Adrian said, "telling myself I was straight, that what I felt for you was just friendship, dating girls who never quite fit, wondering why nothing ever felt right." He reached up and Daniel stopped breathing as Adrian's hand cupped his cheek. "I think I've been in love with you since we were 19 years old, I was just too scared to admit it." "Adrian," Daniel whispered, and he hated how his voice shook, how hope was rising in his chest like a dangerous thing. Don't say this if you don't mean it." "I mean it." Adrian's thumb brushed over Daniel's cheekbone. "I'm terrified, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know that living here with you, being this close to you, I can't pretend anymore, I don't want to." "You said you weren't attracted to guys." "I said that because I was scared. Because admitting I was attracted to you meant admitting everything else, that I'm gay or bi or something, that I've been lying to myself and everyone else, that my father raised me with certain expectations and I was too much of a coward to disappoint him even after he was gone." Daniel felt tears prick his eyes. "You could never disappoint him." "I know that now, but it's taken me 9 years to believe it." Adrian leaned closer and Daniel could feel his breath, could see his pulse jumping in his throat. "Can I kiss you? I've wanted to for so long and I'm so tired of wanting." Daniel should say no, should protect himself, protect their friendship, not risk everything on something that might not last. But he'd been protecting himself for 9 years and look where it had gotten him. "Yes," he breathed. Adrian kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them learning this new language. Then deeper, sure, 9 years of wanting finally finding expression. Daniel's hands fisted in Adrian's sweatshirt, pulling him closer, and Adrian made a sound low in his throat that sent electricity down Daniel's spine. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian pressed his forehead to Daniel's. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry it took me this long." "You're here now." Daniel said, "That's what matters." They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, and the old house seemed to sigh with approval around them. Part 2, building something new. The next morning, Daniel woke up alone in his bed and panicked. Had last night been a dream? Had he imagined the conversation, the confession, the kiss that had turned into kisses, plural, until they'd finally pulled apart and stumbled to their separate bedrooms with promises to talk in the morning? Then he smelled coffee. He found Adrian in the kitchen making breakfast. Eggs, toast, the good coffee they'd been saving. He was humming along to music playing from his phone, and when he saw Daniel in the doorway, his whole face lit up. "Morning," Adrian said, and his smile was nervous but genuine. "I made food. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk or if you'd need space or—" Daniel crossed the kitchen and kissed him. "Good morning," he said when they broke apart. "I definitely want to talk, but first coffee." They sat at the kitchen table, the big oak one that had been in the house for generations, and ate breakfast while the morning light streamed through the windows. It should have been awkward, should have been stilted and strange after last night's revelations. Instead, it felt easy, right, like something clicking into place. So, Adrian said, pushing eggs around his plate, we should probably talk about what this means, what we are now. What do you want us to be? Adrian looked up, meeting his eyes. Together, really together, but I need to be honest with you, I'm new to this. The whole being with a guy thing, I might mess up, I might be weird about it sometimes. That's okay, we'll figure it out together. And we're living together, which is intense if this doesn't work out. It will work out, Daniel interrupted. How can you be so sure? Because we've been best friends for 21 years, we already know each other better than most couples do. We've already survived the hard stuff, your dad, my parents' divorce, all those years of me secretly pinning for you. Adrian winced, I really am sorry about that. Stop apologizing, you needed time to figure yourself out, I get it. Daniel reached across the table, took Adrian's hand. What matters is we're here now, together, in this weird old house that Gran apparently left us so we'd stop being idiots and admit our feelings. Adrian laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. You think that was her plan? I think Gran was a romantic and she loved us both. Daniel squeezed his hand. She'd be happy we figured it out. They spent the day together, not doing anything special, just existing in the same space, relearning each other with this new dynamic. Adrian fixed the loose railing on the front porch while Daniel worked on his laptop nearby, both of them stealing glances and smiles. They made lunch together, fumbling around each other in the kitchen in a way that was new but also familiar. In the afternoon, Daniel helped Adrian organize his art supplies in the sunroom they decided would be his studio. I've never had a real studio before, Adrian said, looking around the space with wonder. They'd cleaned the windows until they sparkled, moved in a desk and drawing table, organized supplies on shelves they'd built together. This is incredible. You're talented, you deserve a space to work. Adrian turned to him, expression soft. How are you so perfect? I'm not perfect. I'm an anxious mess who overthinks everything and stress goes at 2 a.m. and forgets to eat when I'm working. So perfect, Adrian said, pulling him close. They kissed in the sunroom, surrounded by art supplies and streaming light, and Daniel thought, this is what happiness feels like. That night, they didn't go to separate bedrooms. Daniel lay in Adrian's bed in the turret room. Adrian had been right. The view was incredible, with Adrian curled against his side and felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or just rightness. I can't believe we're doing this, Adrian murmured into the darkness. Having regrets already? God, no, the opposite. I can't believe I waited this long, that I wasted 9 years. They weren't wasted, Daniel said firmly. You needed that time, and it made this, he gestured between them, better. We know what we're choosing now. Adrian propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at Daniel with an expression so tender it made Daniel's throat tight. I'm choosing you, every day for as long as you'll have me. That's a long time, Daniel warned. Good. They made love for the first time that night, slow and careful and profound. Adrian was nervous. I've never done this with a guy before, but Daniel guided him through it, and by the end they were both shaking and laughing and crying a little. That was, Adrian started, then stopped. Yeah, Daniel agreed. They fell asleep tangled together, and Daniel dreamed of his grandmother smiling. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Daniel's life. They fell into a routine that felt both new and ancient. Mornings in bed together, coffee in the kitchen, work in their separate spaces, Daniel at his desk in the library, Adrian in his sunroom studio. Lunch together, afternoons spent on house projects, evenings curled up by the fire. They were fixing up the house slowly, room by room. Adrian repaired the porch railing, replaced broken windows, painted the trim. Daniel tackled the garden, clearing years of overgrowth, discovering flower beds and stone paths beneath the weeds. Together, they stripped wallpaper in the upstairs hallway, painted the dining room a warm sage green, refinished the floors in the ballroom. It was hard work, but it was satisfying, watching the house slowly come back to life, putting their own stamp on it while honoring its history. Your gran would be proud, Adrian said one evening. They were standing in the front garden, surveying their work, the trimmed rose bushes, the weeded beds, the repaired brick pathway. I think she'd just be glad someone's loving the place again, Daniel said. It deserves to be loved. Adrian looked at him with that soft expression he'd started wearing a lot. So do you. I am loved? Daniel pulled him close, not caring if the neighbors saw. They'd met a few of them, an older couple next door, a family with young kids across the street, and everyone had been kind, welcoming, blessedly uncurious about two men living together in the old Reeves house. You are, Adrian agreed, kissing him sweetly. Very, very loved. Not everything was perfect. They had their first real fight 3 weeks in about something stupid. Adrian had left paint supplies all over the kitchen table and Daniel had snapped about it because he was stressed about a work deadline. It escalated, both of them saying things they didn't mean. Until Adrian had stormed out of the house. Daniel had found him an hour later sitting on the dock by the lake, staring out at the water. I'm sorry, Daniel said, sitting beside him. I was an ass. The paint supplies weren't a big deal. No, I should have cleaned up. I know you need the table for work sometimes. Adrian leaned against him. I'm sorry too, for the things I said. We're going to fight sometimes, that's normal. I know, I don't want to mess this up. You're too important. You won't mess it up, we won't mess it up, we just have to keep talking, keep being honest. Daniel took his hand, even when it's hard. They walked back to the house together, and that night they talked through their triggers, their needs, their boundaries. It wasn't romantic or sexy, but it was important. It was building something real. November arrived with cold rain and early darkness. The house took on a different character in winter, cozy but also somehow more alive, settling and creaking like it was trying to tell them stories. They found the love letters on a gray Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was cleaning out the attic, really cleaning it this time, not just the cursory sweep they'd done when they first moved in. Adrian was helping him, both of them dusty and sneezing, when Daniel pulled out an old wooden box from behind a stack of forgotten books. This is what I was telling you about, he said, opening it carefully. Inside were dozens of letters tied with faded ribbon, the paper yellowed with age. Your grandfather's letters, Adrian breathed. They brought the box downstairs to the library, made tea, and carefully began reading. The letters were beautiful, passionate, aching, full of longing. They chronicled a love affair between Daniel's grandfather Thomas and a man named James, starting in the summer of 1952 and ending abruptly in the fall of 1953. My dearest James, one letter read, every moment away from you is torture. I know what we have is impossible in the eyes of the world, but I cannot regret loving you. You are the best thing that has ever happened to me. Thomas, another replied, I dream of a world where we could be together openly, where we could build a life without hiding, but we were not born into that world, my love, and I fear we never will be. The last letter was from Thomas to James, dated October 1953. My dearest James, by the time you read this, I will be engaged to Margaret. Please understand, I love her in my way. She is kind and good, and she deserves better than a man who cannot give her his whole heart. But I cannot spend my life alone, and we both know our love has no future. Please don't hate me for this choice. Please know that I will carry you with me always in the parts of my heart that Margaret will never reach. You will always be my first love, my truest love, even if you cannot be my only love. Forgive me and please find your own happiness. You deserve that, James, you deserve everything. Forever yours, Thomas. Daniel set down the letter with shaking hands. God. He chose safety over happiness, Adrian said quietly. He chose the life people expected instead of the life he wanted. Can you blame him? It was 1953. Being gay could get you arrested, fired, beaten. He was protecting himself. I know, but it's still sad. Adrian picked up one of the earlier letters, the handwriting young and hopeful. They loved each other so much and they couldn't have it. Daniel thought about his grandfather, the quiet, kind man who'd taught him to fish, who'd always had a melancholy air about him that Daniel had never understood until now. He thought about his grandmother, who'd been warm and loving but never quite reached the deepest parts of her husband. They were both cheated, Daniel said. Gramps and Gran, she deserved someone who could love her fully, and Gramps deserved to be with James. The world cheated them, Adrian corrected. Society, fear, the times they lived in, they were just trying to survive. They sat in silence, surrounded by the weight of those old letters, old loves, old losses. "We're so lucky," Adrian said finally, "that we get to be together, that we live in a time where it's possible." "We are," Daniel agreed, "but there are still places where it's not safe, still people who would hurt us for this." "I know," Adrian reached for his hand, "but right now in this house we're safe, we can be ourselves, we can love each other openly." Daniel looked around the library at the old books, the comfortable furniture, the fire crackling in the hearth. He thought about his grandfather, about the life he couldn't have, about the love letters he'd kept hidden away in an attic. "We should live here," Daniel said suddenly. "Not just for 5 years, forever. We should make this house a place where love isn't hidden away, where we can be ourselves completely." Adrian smiled. "I'd like that." They carefully packed away the letters, returning them to their box. But they kept them in the library now, not hidden in the attic. A reminder of the love that came before theirs, the sacrifices that made their happiness possible. That night, wrapped in each other's arms, Daniel whispered, "I love you." "I love you too," Adrian whispered back. "Thank you for waiting for me, for not giving up." "Always," Daniel promised. "I'll always wait for you, though I'm really glad I don't have to anymore." Adrian laughed softly and they fell asleep to the sound of rain on the roof and the old house settling around them. Part 3, Facing the Past. Winter deepened. Snow fell, transforming the house and garden into something from a fairy tale. They decorated for Christmas, finding boxes of vintage ornaments in the attic, stringing lights on the porch, putting a tree in the front window. Daniel's mother came to visit, and if she was surprised to find them sharing a bedroom, she didn't say anything. She just hugged them both and told Daniel she was proud of him for finally figuring things out. "I always knew," she'd said over dinner, "about you and Adrian, even when you were kids, the way you looked at each other, I knew." "Why didn't you say anything?" Daniel had asked. "Because you both needed to figure it out on your own," she'd smiled at Adrian. "I'm glad you did." Adrian's mother had been harder. She'd come for New Year's, and while she'd been polite, there was a tension in her shoulders, a tightness around her mouth that spoke of discomfort. "Mom," Adrian had said carefully over coffee in the library, "this is important to me. Daniel is important to me. I need you to be okay with this." "I'm trying," she'd said. "It's just your father had such plans for you, a wife, children, carrying on the family business. Dad's been gone for 8 years, and even if he was here, Mom, I can't live my life for someone else's expectations, not even his." She'd cried then. And Adrian had held her while Daniel discreetly left the room. When he came back, she was wiping her eyes and looking at Adrian with something like acceptance. "You're happy," she'd said. "I can see that. I am happier than I've ever been." "Then I'll learn to be okay with it for you," she'd looked at Daniel then. "Take care of him, he's all I have left." "I will," Daniel had promised, "I swear." She'd left after New Year's and Adrian had been quiet for days after. Daniel had given him space, let him process, been there when Adrian needed to talk and silent when he didn't. "She'll come around," Daniel had said one night. They were in bed, Adrian's head on his chest, both of them watching shadows dance on the ceiling. "I know, it's just hard, wanting her approval even though I know I don't need it. You're allowed to want it anyway, she's your mom. I just wish my dad was here. I think he would have understood. He always told me to be true to myself. I wish I could tell him I finally am." Daniel had held him while he cried and loved him through the grief that surfaced. Because coming out, even in your late 20s, even to yourself, meant facing all the years you'd spent hiding, all the versions of yourself you'd killed to survive. February brought a cold snap and cabin fever. They'd been living in the house for 4 months, together as a couple for 3, and the isolation was starting to wear on them. "We should have people over," Adrian said one morning. "Friends, a housewarming party or something."